This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Gary's wearing his basic black for the Sunday Bard. I, as promised, had upgraded the wardrobe since it's our Sunday best. How are you, young man?
I am well, sir. How are you? You survived that New York flooding? Made it back to California?
I did. I've got a guy who works for me who will always have something to say about I don't want to call him alibi, but I'll just say an excuse for every season. He sent me a video that was as good a piece of evidence for why he couldn't get to work that day as I've ever seen.
Yeah, the videos coming out of New York this past Friday and some into Saturday were pretty miraculous. Flooding in the streets, the subways. I believe I saw one that had a couple of feet of water in LaGuardia. I mean, it was just absolutely wild.
I saw the one in LaGuardia. I saw also somebody, it looked like by Carroll Street, had one that looked like a whirlpool, which was just unbelievable.
That one looked like maybe a manhole cover had been knocked loose and it was just all going in there. It was crazy. Yeah, I was watching with much interest.
Yeah, it's something. It was something. But back to California, sunny California, although we did have our rain interlude quite a bit this week. And we will, without much further ado, why don't we go to, can you guess which clip I'd like to see first?
Well, I think it's going to be something from the Ron DeSantis, Gavin Newsom world, and we have a couple in that family. So why don't you give me a little direction here?
Okay, then there you go. I think maybe we start off with DeSantis on the Bill Maher show, because I thought that was kind of an interesting. There was a couple of good clips, and Bill came back with a good rejoinder.
All right, we'll start here.
But Trump lost the election, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why did you campaign for people?
Because I wanted to see Republicans win key races.
And
I think it's important.
That's not a deal breaker issue for you? That's not democracy?
Well, okay, let's go back to 2016. Your friends in Hollywood were cutting ads telling the Electoral College to vote against Trump in the Electoral College because it was stolen. They said Russia stole the election. For years they said that. So don't act like this is like a unique thing in modern history of the country.
First of all, Ron, I have no friends in Hollywood.
You do remember those commercials, though. I remember them.
A pretty good line by Bill, and I didn't mean to step on it, but you give DeSantis credit. He was ready for that, and I'm sure that's part of his stump speech talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. He, I thought Maher was very funny throughout that whole thing, but I thought DeSantis was pretty well prepared for the line of questioning. I mean, it's not exactly, you don't exactly need a decoder ring to know the kinds of questions you're going to be asked if you go on the Bill Maher show and you're someone like DeSantis. But I thought he was well prepared and gave the best versions of the answers that exist.
As opposed to some of his stump speeches and his debate performances. I give him credit where credit is due. You have the next. Why don't you segue into the next clip we've got? Well, we're setting it up in terms of a finale here. So.
I believe you already did segue because you brought up the GOP debates, and recently we had another one out, I believe, at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California, and Gavin Newsom was on hand as well, and he spoke to someone from Fox 11 and gave his thoughts.
What's the biggest mistake?
The fact that he took this debate, the fact that he took the bait in relation to this debate, shows that he's completely unqualified to be president of the United States.
I'm going to pause right here and just he'll get to it in a second. But Gavin is referring to the impending debate. For anyone who's not aware, in November, Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis are going to debate each other on Fox News. So just to give you a little context.
I'm qualified to be president of the United States. That's my humble first.
Why is that? You're baiting him with the debate offer?
Of course. I mean, why is he debating a guy who's not even running for president when he's running for president? He's showing up at the Reagan Library, hallowed ground, and he puts out an ad today, not for his presidential campaign, to promote a debate against the governor of California. I mean, this guy's distracted. So I don't know that he has it in his heart. I think, here's my personal opinion about Ron DeSantis. He regrets running for president. He made a huge mistake. He listened to his consultants. He bought his own hype. He had this little God complex. I mean, look at the ads themselves. Literally, God created. I mean, he bought into all this stuff. And he quickly regretted it, but he's stuck. And here's the problem. He got one chance at first impression. He's belly flopped. He's down 30-plus points from where he started. So it's a terrible situation for him.
Reminds me of boxers talking smack right before the big fight. So it'll be interesting to see. There's also quite a bit. Well, I don't want to step on it as well. For those who say that Gavin is not running, Gary, do you have another clip which might argue or at least be a canary in the coal mine there?
I do. It's actually from the exact same episode of Real Time with Bill Maher. This is much later in the show, whereas Ron DeSantis was the initial one-on-one interview. This is from the final segment of the show, which many might be familiar with, called New Rules. This is just a clip of that segment.
Far from being the only one who could beat Trump in 2024, Biden may well be the only Democrat who would lose to him. James Carville told me any centrist Democrat around 50 or 60 would get 55% of the vote, and I believe him. You know that future headlines bit we do? Well, the most predictable headline ever is presidential race tied. 2 weeks before every election, it's always tied, no matter who is running. The vast majority just vote for the D or the R. But Biden is the one Democrat who gives pause to so many people, even in his own party. Andrew Sullivan makes the necessary point that a new nominee for the Democrats would shift the dynamic immediately. Trump would be the tired old guy retread hanging on to the past, and the Democrat would now be the future. Let the Republicans be the party with the candidate who babbles nonsense, shouts at the TV, and can't do ramps. Joe, you did noble service for your country, and you checked that big box, the President of the United States. Of course, as a politician, you're naturally going to say, but the work is not finished. Of course not. It never is. But it's time to let someone else finish it. You don't want to go down as Ruth Bader Biden. America is calling, Joe, and it's saying, that's not our car, Grandpa. We're over here.
Yeah, I hate to say it. Somebody had said, you want to hear the most diabolical prediction that I've heard recently, was a friend of mine said, Newsom will cut a deal where he will appoint Kamala Harris to the Senator Feinstein post, and that she will return as a senator so that he can swap out and run as vice president. And I said, it's such genius that I can't imagine it would actually happen. But it's something,
it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? He wants to appoint, he's already gone on the record and said he's going to appoint a black female, but only as a caretaker, which has driven Barbara Lee, who's running third in the polls and running in for the March primary. She's behind Adam Schiff, who's number one in the polls, and Katie Porter, who's number two. And so Gavin has said publicly he doesn't want to appoint somebody who is running. So then the parlor game is, who does he appoint? And there was the same friend I was talking to. I said, well, what about Holly Mitchell, who's one of the county board of supervisors here, which is a very powerful position? They said, no, she's too young. She wouldn't want to resign as a soup. Tells you something, to become a U.S. senator because of the power that she's got. And then the question was, what about Karen Bass, which I wholeheartedly endorse. I would love to see Karen Bass become the U.S. senator. And people say, well, why would you want that? I'll tell a little story. My father, one time, I remember many years ago, we're going back 40 years, back when there was an LA municipal court and an LA Superior Court. There was a municipal court judge who was sitting in Glendale, who my father thought was the worst judge imaginable. But he was handling in the old days, a municipal court judge handled basically misdemeanors and felony prelims. So you could do a lot of damage if you were a municipal court judge who didn't have any sense, so to speak, because you're dealing with people who, they're committing misdemeanors, or if it's a felony, you're only dealing with the probable cause. And, that's basically your run-of-the-mill defendant, if you will, not somebody who's out there slashing and burning and doing felonious acts for the most part. So this guy decides he's going to run for judge, and my father heartily endorsed him, and as a well qualified for the Superior Court to get an elevation. And he found out about it, and he asked my father to approach the bench and said, "I thought you hated me, or just thought I was the worst judge that has ever been, and I wanted to thank you for endorsing me and giving me such a glowing send off." And my dad, without missing a beat, said, "I just thought you could do less damage there than you do here." And so
that's how we get to Karen Bass as a state.
Exactly. I know it was a long way to go, but they also, the usual suspects do not think that she will take the gubernatorial appointment. Then I thought, what about Maxine Waters? Because that would just make people's heads explode. And what a great capstone to her career. And there isn't anybody who thinks that she would do it. Nancy Pelosi, nobody who thinks that she would do it. And so now the thought is that maybe Shirley Weber, who he being Newsom, already previously appointed as Secretary of State, and would she take the U.S. Senator? And then how do you cuff them and say, okay, I'm going to appoint you, but you can't run in March? I don't know that legally you can do that unless the deadline has passed, and I'm not so sure that has. But boy, it's a fascinating game, and we're going to learn awfully quick, because right now, especially in the Judiciary Committee, we're tied between Democrats and Republicans. Nobody's getting out of there, so all of the judicial appointments are held up basically at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, especially with such a short window in between, the special election and then the next real election. And it's going to be fascinating to see exactly how it works. I don't know. It seems like this whole thing of the Democrats coming out and announcing what qualifiers they're going to put on picking candidates for jobs is something that's becoming antiquated. I mean, we famously had it with Biden and Kamala Harris. Now we've got Gavin Newsom doing it. It seems like it's diminishing to the person who ultimately gets the job. Why don't you just go out and say, I'm going to pick the best candidate and then use the qualifiers that you have in your head anyways without announcing them?
I think it does set a bar that is ultimately comes back and bites you. I understand the idea that Biden is sitting in office, and by virtue of the black female contingency and constituency, I think is probably a better word, is almost undeniable. And yeah, I got that. Gavin, the same. I don't think is quite the same, but when Kamala became VP, I believe now that there is not a single African-American female in the U.S. Senate, which makes zero sense. So I get that you wanted to do it, but I think now you've reached a situation which, by the way, did not require a whole lot of prognostication. I mean, I know that he thought all along that Dianne Feinstein was going to hold on until March. But if this isn't a kind of a wake-up call that you can't rely on those kinds of things, as morbid as they may be, I don't know what is. And to your point, he's now boxed himself into where even somebody who normally would be supportive of him, Barbara Lee, is chastising Newsom. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The next week, I think something will break.
Absolutely. All right, Mark, we got a few more stories here, a few more topics. Is there one that is piquing your interest more than the others?
No, I'm going to let you curate. That's part of my new Sunday mind meditation.
All right.
Like curate.
Well, we've got one here that's from that's being reported on from the New York Post. We're going to play their video. For anyone who is listening, there's a little bit of text on the screen towards the end. So if you want to check that out, please do go to youtube.com/reasonable doubt podcast. Be sure to subscribe while you're there, and you can check this out. But for audio listeners, you're not going to be missing a ton. I say you're not going to be missing a ton, and then I realize that a lot of this video is just people shouting. So maybe I should give it a little bit of a setup here.
Yeah, why don't you do a play-by-play there? Let's see. I'd like the Gary. You've got the voice for play-by-play, so let's see.
Well, thank you. So what we have here is we have a bunch of looting going on in Philadelphia, and it is being Instagram lived and put on stories by an influencer known as Meatball. And she is basically showing people who are looting from an Apple store. Now they're destroying Apple devices, presumably outside the store. And it says Dejaya Blackwell, aka Meatball, was arrested after live streaming the looting in Philadelphia on her Instagram stories. The shocking video, Philly influencers apparently cheered the crowd on as they ransacked Apple and Lululemon stores, also Foot Locker, I believe. Blackwell posted this message Tuesday evening. It says, what are we doing tonight behind this injustice? Tap in. This is an apparent response to drop charges against police officer Mark Dial, the cop who fatally shot Eddie. I believe his name is Eddie Israeri, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but there was a traffic stop that was caught on body cam footage where an officer fired on a person that was in a car and eventually ended up killing him. From my limited reading about this story, the cops initially came out and said that the motorist had exited his car holding a knife and lunged at police officers. And when the body cam footage was subsequently reviewed, the police commissioner had to come out and say that the initial reports were clearly not in line with what happened because the victim was in his car.
Shock, oh shock. You mean to tell me that in a police shooting, the police weren't forthcoming?
I know that this is new territory for you, Mark.
Well, I'll tell you this week also, just a personal side for these you watch all the time. You'll remember the Partridge case in the Eighth Circuit, the second time we got a decision reversing the trial court and in a published decision, 2-1, the city of Benton's lawyers had asked for a rehearing amongst the entire Eighth Circuit. And just this week, the Eighth Circuit denied that. And also this week, it appears that the city of Benton now wants to take this case that we've been talking about for years and that I've been fighting for years to the U.S. Supreme Court. So here we come. They've announced their intention to go to SCOTUS, and we'll see if when it's the prosecution asking that SCOTUS hears a case, whether that tips the scale to put us up there in front of the Supreme Court on the issue of qualified immunity. So stay tuned for that.
I absolutely will. So yes, this influencer out of Philly was hit with 6 felony charges and I believe 2 misdemeanors as well. At one point during her live stream, she turned the camera to herself and basically challenged the cops to arrest her, and they did.
Yeah, what can I tell you? This clients sometimes do stuff that is inexplicable, and I say clients. I don't represent her, but I'm sure the lawyer who will ultimately represent her will ask her what the heck. And I think she's crowdfunding also for either legal or bail as well.
Well, she made her bail, so I think it's probably for legal. But yeah, she was released on $25,000 bail the next day. And yeah, it's confusing. It's got to be vexing for whoever does end up representing her to have that kind of thing live streamed of her own accord, and then just to have it come back and bite her in the ass.
You know, I know this was Philadelphia, and I know it fits a certain narrative that progressive prosecutors, because Larry Krasner, who's the prosecutor or the DA, elected DA in Philadelphia, is noted as, like George Gascon here in Los Angeles, as a left-wing progressive prosecutor, and they're usually tagged with much of this retail theft smash and grab. And it fits a narrative, but you got to fit into that narrative. How do you explain at the very same time this is also a phenomenon in the UK and other countries? This is not something unique to LA. You would never know that, by the way, by the reporting on it. I think that there is a alternative explanation, if you will, but I'll leave it at that, and I'll read some of the comments that we'll get this week, and then we'll respond to them next week. What's your explanation for how do you explain that these retail smash and grabs don't just happen in the U.S., in cities that have so-called progressive prosecutors, but happen globally and in jurisdictions that do not have progressive prosecutors overseas?
Okay, we got two more here, and we're going to start with one that is a longtime case we've been following. It involves Alex Murdaugh.
A government shut.
Misconception about the case is when the guilty verdict came in, people did not understand that jury had heard almost 3 weeks of evidence not related to the murder, but to the financial crimes, which he's always admitted to. But we believe it so prejudiced them that when we put the forensic evidence in, which is very, very strong for his innocence, acquittal, they didn't hear it. They never saw it. So this idea he's been convicted is a misconception that he was convicted on the evidence relating to the murder. Well, we've filed an appeal on that trial. We've also recently filed a motion for a new trial based on jury tampering by the clerk of court. That's pending in front of our Court of Appeals. We want them to stay the appeal and let us have a hearing on that issue. We just finished the filing on that yesterday, so we hope to hear something in 2 to 4 weeks from the Court of Appeals about that.
Yeah, for those who aren't in the weeds, Dick Harpootlian was the lead lawyer, ably assisted by his co-counsel Jim Griffin, who tried the Murdaugh case. And what ended up happening is they found out after the verdict, and the jury came back in incredibly quick period of time, 3 hours.
3 hours, yeah.
They found out later the clerk of the court had gone in there and basically said, "Don't believe Murdaugh when he takes a stand.
Don't let him sway you. Watch his body mannerisms very carefully." She also went on to tell them that while they were deliberating, that smokers couldn't have breaks, and just a few, several little things that, when all cobbled together, look very bad.
And I think, I don't know if it was in that clip or somewhere else, she has doubled down. In the Netflix series, she's out there talking about that he must have had help with somebody to clean up the scene because there isn't any forensic evidence. I mean, it really is astonishing, and probably a violation of the judicial ethics rules in South Carolina, which I believe cover her as an elected official in the judicial system as well. The whole thing is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I haven't seen the interview, but I've been seeing promos. I believe she's going to be on Fox News, and they're promoting the hell out of it. And she's, telling her side of the story. It's a wild set of circumstances, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We will definitely keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I really don't know how they get around not, at the very least, having an evidentiary hearing, and number two, how that with 2 jurors swearing under penalty of perjury that it happened, where do they go from there? I mean, I unless there's something we're missing, it's quite a compelling story for a reversal here.
Yep. And it looks like Harpootlian and Griffin are both, very interested in staying involved. So hopefully that will.
Right. To the point, to their credit, to the point where they say we're doing it, we'll do it pro bono because we're in for a dime, in for a dollar, so to speak. And by the way, all those who are always slamming criminal defense lawyers, we do tend to have a tail on our zealous advocacy for clients, and kudos to them.
Yeah. And for anyone who says that they, are getting tons of publicity off of this, that's true. They are, but they are stating publicly that so far they've only been paid $25,000 and that they're willing to work pro bono going forward. So, that's not an inconsiderable amount of work when you consider the trial itself was several weeks, and it must have taken months and months of work to get the kind of, information and like the forensics of the cell phones and all the different guns and all that stuff. So they're certainly putting a lot of work in, and they seem to believe his innocence.
And by the way, as somebody who's handled my share of high-profile cases, the publicity is not generally something that is monetized in these cases. In fact, it has quite the opposite. Your other clients or prospective clients think you're too busy with your high-profile case to pay attention to them. So it really does not work the way that people think it works.
Yeah, well, tell that to the internet.
Jewelry is having a big moment right now, and with hundreds of products popping up in your feed every day, it can be hard to find a brand you trust. Alex and Ani has been creating meaningful jewelry for over 20 years, designing pieces that connect you with all of life's important moments. With an emphasis on value, there's truly something for everyone. You might be most familiar with their signature charm bangle. This bracelet literally created the category of meaningful jewelry and had you stacking charms from your wrist to your elbow. This piece is an icon for a reason. Completely size inclusive, each bracelet is adorned with a symbol designed to tell your story and express your unique style. Beyond the bangle, you'll find stylish, affordable jewelry for every occasion, from classic pieces to bold statement looks. Don't know where to start? Alex and Ani makes it easy to unpack the trends you're after and sprinkle in your personality too. Each piece comes with a personalized message and meaning, truly making it the perfect gift. You can take comfort in knowing that you're shopping with a socially conscious brand as well. To date, Alex and Ani has donated over $60 million to nonprofits worldwide, connecting fashion and philanthropy in an easy, fun, affordable way. Visit alexandani.com right now to discover the confidence that comes with a perfectly accessorized piece of jewelry. Right now, Alex and Ani is offering our audience 20% off with code MIDAS at checkout. Again, head to alexandani.com. That's alexandani.com and use code MIDAS at checkout for 20% off your order.
All right. One last case here. We recently got news that the government shutdown was going to be avoided. There was a 45-day extension passed, I believe. It was passed with a lot of support, and that will move the goalpost into sometime in November. But in the course of that, we had one last story that we're going to cover, and it involves a representative named Jamal Bowman.
A government shutdown is not the only issue on lawmakers' minds tonight. Just before the House passed the stopgap spending bill this afternoon, Democratic Congressman Jamal Bowman pulled a fire alarm inside the Capitol. The New York Democrat says it was an accident, but he's already facing backlash from his Republican colleagues, including a possible investigation by lawmakers on a House committee that oversees the Capitol Police.
He violated the exact same law that January 6th defendants are being prosecuted for every single day.
His initial explanation that it was an accident doesn't seem to really pass muster.
This should not go without punishment. He pulled a fire alarm in a minute of hours before the government being shut down, trying to dictate that government would shut down. What's going through a person's mind like that?
It deserves to be investigated, and in normal times, this would be considered a much bigger deal. The problem now is you have people, I mean, look, people are comparing it to January 6th. So does that mean that in a couple of weeks, Kevin McCarthy is going to be okay with it? Because he's okay with January 6th now, right? I mean, the people who are most active about comparing to January 6th are the ones who are most forgiving of January 6th, which is a weird kind of locution. But it's a very serious thing. And this guy was a former middle school principal. Like, they lecture little kids about not pulling fire alarms. There's no way he didn't know what a fire alarm is. So, I mean, yeah, got to hear his version of events, but it's a very strange story.
I couldn't agree more. And by the way, that it's a very strange story. I didn't know the middle school principal, but that is kind of a
add some color.
Yeah, it definitely adds some color. I would give him the presumption until we hear what he has to say, because I believe at least what was formulating as his explanation / defense is that he was locked out and he was trying to get through. Did you hear this?
I did not hear that. I will grant a little bit of allowance for that, but I've never accidentally pulled a fire alarm. That's all I can really say from my own experience.
In emergency, break glass. There's a reason they say that. So, on that subject, I'm going to tease something that I've wanted to share, but I'm waiting for the final decision, which is this week. And it was the last case I tried. And for those who have listened for years to us, it was one of these, what I call drive-by ADA trolling lawsuits. And we won, but I'll go into more detail this next week or this episode. I think it's fascinating. We've got, there it is, there's the tentative decision talking about how we won. That tentative was adopted. It was September 1st. But boy, there's some stuff there that I really want to talk about. And I'm going to also give you some thoughts, Gary, as to where we go from here, because this case could have been resolved for de minimis dollars. I refused to do it because it was such a judicial outrage. And wait until you hear what we discovered during this trial.
I remember this case. It has to be 5 years old, if not longer.
Correct.
And
Correct. Which tells you it's been knocking around for 5 years, basically with guys pleading with me to settle. I just said, no, we're going to trial. You filed this BS case. We're going to trial. And wait until you hear what actually transpired and what I believe was a complete fraud upon the court. Not once, not twice, but hundreds of times.
I look forward to it, Mark. I can't wait to get some resolution from something over a half decade in the making. Thank you for making some time this Sunday morning, and you're looking good, by the way.
Well, I got on my Sunday best for Sunday Bard. Thanks, Gary.
All right. You have a good one, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.